Good morning and welcome to the Farm Show on Westplex Talk 1045. I'm your host, John Combest. We have so much to get to today. I'm going to try to not race through everything today, but still hit all the items on our agenda. Here in A Block, we're going to start with big soybean news, and then we'll give an update on a ballot initiative in Missouri for 2026 that we discussed about 2 months ago. We're going to hear straight from the source of what you might expect and when you might expect the next round of news. And then in B Block, we're going to talk about saving money. We're going to have some tips from the Missouri Soybean Association, among others. And then in C Block, we're going to dive into a brand new 2026 crop protection report that'll also give you a little bit of an idea of where you might be spending money in 2026 and how you might save a little money in 2026. Let's get to that big soybean news. On Wednesday, big news from the American Soybean Association. I guess actually it came from governmental actors, but let's go straight to ASA and hear what they have to say. The American Soybean Association appreciates President Trump and his administration for prioritizing America's farmers in today's announcement regarding U.S. China trade. After months of stalled purchases and uncertainty, this is a very positive development for soybean farmers who rely on open markets. I'll skip a paragraph and then get right to the heart of the matter. While details are still emerging and to be confirmed, we understand that today's announcement includes minimum purchase commitments of 12 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans for the remainder of this marketing year and a minimum of 25 million metric tons annually through 2028. ASA is encouraged that these commitments are framed as minimums and look forward to continued growth in soybean purchases beyond these levels. China has historically purchased 25 to 30 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans in recent years, and today's commitments lay a strong foundation to return to those traditional volumes over the coming marketing years. You, of course, can find more from the American Soybean Association by going to soygrowers.com. That's soygrowers.com. Now let's get into the heart of our first segment, A Block. 2 months ago, we had a gentleman named Eapen Thampy on the air. Eapen is a longtime marijuana, cannabis activist and lobbyist. Eapen talked about a potential 2026 statewide ballot initiative that would change Missouri marijuana regulations. That would directly affect the hemp market and folks who consider growing hemp. I asked Eapen about the decision-making process for potential hemp growers and straight up questions about his timeline. This interview was conducted on Thursday, October 30th. Let's get straight into it. Back in mid-September, we were joined by marijuana lobbyist Eapen Thampy. And back in September, Eapen and his team were making plans for a potential 2026 ballot initiative focused on expanding marijuana legalization in the state of Missouri. Today, we are joined by Eapen Thampy. Eapen, welcome back to the Farm Show.
Always good to be here, John.
Eapen, I hear that you have news on a potential 2026 ballot initiative and or legislative action. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Danny Hoskins, our Secretary of State, has certified 4 versions of a ballot initiative for signature collection, and the goal of this ballot measure is to kind of unify the regulatory spheres for marijuana and hemp and just treat it as one plant, which it is, and kind of benchmark the regulatory capacity there to how we handle alcohol and tobacco, which is, a template that has worked well for about 90 years. So, right now we're evaluating our options in terms of should we initiate a signature gathering campaign. Those are very expensive, so there's questions about funders, both local and national. as well as their options in the Missouri General Assembly in 2026.
If you look at a statewide ballot initiative, not just on marijuana, but on any issue, about how much money does it take to run a statewide signature gathering campaign?
We got estimates from 3 or 4 signature collection firms for about between $3 and $5 million. It was something of a pretty large spread there, but kind of a question of like how much you're paying your signature collectors hourly. Are you paying them bonuses? How much over collection are you kind of riding in? And I say over collection because like if you tell me I need 10,000 signatures, I should probably collect 20 because a lot of those signatures will be invalid if the individual is not a registered voter, is not puts down the wrong address or other information. People move, people forget, people think because they went to DMV and got their license renewed that they're registered to vote. So there's definitely some challenges in the signature collection process. It's a very very big very big logistically complicated task.
If you were to look at the folks who bankrolled the original the original marijuana legalization ballot initiative back in 2022, who are the folks that would be most willing to put some money into signature gathering for 2026? I'm guessing it's a different donor crowd than the original 2022 crowd.
Yeah, so actually, would probably want to go back to 2018, right? Because 2018, the original medical marijuana framework was created. It was expanded through the 2022 ballot initiative, and by 2022, the controversy over marijuana in Missouri has not been about marijuana for about 8 years. It's about who controls the licenses. So a lot of the market entrants who got approved for licensing and as a result of the 2018 campaign, there was enormous controversy over that because a lot of the licensing decisions, who won, who lost, how the applications were scored, people would submit 5 applications for dispensaries, for instance, and the applications are all the same except for like the locations, right? And they would get 5 different scores, right? So a lot of arbitrary scoring practices like that. And then a lot of the people who scored highly or won licenses seem to be connected to, I'm not going to name any names here, but, a certain group of well-connected individuals. And so there was a lot of allegations of corruption that was actually substantiated by legislative investigations by the House of Representatives Special Committee on Governmental Oversight a few years after. So the controversy has been over licensing. Currently, the recreational marijuana market is largely dominated by probably 8 to 10 companies, all of whom are out of state, like a company called Good Day Farm from Arkansas, we believe owns somewhere between 20 and 40% of the retail licenses, possibly more. There's other companies own 10, 15% of the licenses, and as a result, there's this market begins to look a lot like it's being dominated by a cartel of large companies that control most, if not all, of the licenses. So those issues for consumers have been locked out of the opportunity of this market. On the other side, federally legal hemp needs a strong, secure regulatory framework to give consumers and governmental stakeholders and public health authorities more clarity and more confidence in that market. And so it's kind of bizarre that we have 2 markets, one for marijuana, one for hemp, that are regulated separately, but we should regulate them the same since they are, after all, from the same plant, and create a free market that gives opportunity to ordinary Missourians who have an idea and want to innovate.
You mentioned the extreme expense that it would take to get something on the ballot in terms of gathering signatures. What are you comfortable saying about your timetable of a go or no go of moving forward with one of the four initiative petitions?
We'll probably make that decision here in the next 2 weeks, maybe by the end of November, right? And what we know, we've established the interest is there and the money is there, but for the funders, potential funders, there are a lot of questions over timing because, once you start at, let's say I accepted the low bid for the signature collection firm. Well, we pretty much would have to write a $1 million check by the end of November, right? And then we'd have to do the same thing in probably in January and probably again in February or March. And so like lining up funder commitments on a timetable and having the ability to ensure that those commitments come in as they're scheduled is the whole trick of this, right? Plus, it's not just a signature gathering. You have to have a media team. You have to have a campaign manager. You have to have a really good attorney who understands ballot initiatives and election law. A whole host of expenses you have to think about. And like I said, we know the interest is there. We have commitments for about half of what we need to raise and spend. So the question we need to answer in the next 15, 20, 30 days is, can we secure the rest of the commitments that we need for this to move forward? If not, I can tell you we have had commitments from lawmakers to help advance this issue in the next session of the 2026 General Assembly.
So, Eapen, you've been on our weekday morning show, the Brad and John show, from 7 to 8 a.m. here on Westplex Talk 104.5. And you've explained constitutional amendments and the things that lawmakers can do. Can you remind me, when you talk about legislation in 2026, what are the options for lawmakers?
There are basically two. We would probably want to format our ballot initiatives as joint resolutions. So the joint resolution process is exactly the same as like passing an ordinary bill, except when it is passed by the House and the Senate, it goes to a referendum vote. So it goes to the next general election or next scheduled election, and the voters get to decide on it instead of the governor signing it. And that's the pathway to amending the Constitution, which is what you would have to do to reform the marijuana program, because the marijuana program is Article 14 of the Missouri Constitution. The second option that we have is a little bit more limited one, but if we can't advance a joint resolution to change the Article 14 of the Missouri Constitution and reform the marijuana framework, then we will just try to establish a statutory regulatory framework for hemp. And last year you had Representatives Bill Allen, Dave Hinman, Ben Baker file bills for that purpose that we liked and thought were viable. It's going to be a pretty significant fight next session, so we'll see how it goes.
Previously, you've mentioned the absurdity of one plant being regulated in two different ways. And you've also mentioned the fact that you think that a lot of the regulation should be coming from the federal government. Can you explain where we are in terms of federal regulation and perhaps some sort of rescheduling?
Yeah, absolutely. So hemp is cannabis that is tested before harvest and is determined to have less than 0.3% delta 9 THC or tetrahydrocannabinol. Marijuana is cannabis that has more than that 0.3% cutoff. So for 100 years, marijuana and hemp have been federally illegal. And then in 2018, President Trump removed the hemp classification from federal drug scheduling, and that kind of led to a federally legal interstate commerce model of cannabis, right, which is where I represent a lot of companies and interests. With marijuana, however, marijuana continues to be Schedule 1. Now, President Trump, during his election, committed to advancing a process of rescheduling marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, which would make it legal by prescription. So my latest communications from folks with at the White House level indicates that President Trump and his team are looking at all the options, and they kind of see this the same way. This is bizarre that we have marijuana and hemp that represents two different classifications of the same plant. We have state regulations in a lot of places for marijuana that constitute licensing monopolies. They're looking to kind of thread a needle in terms of what they want to tell the Attorney General and the DEA to do in terms of reclassification. And then Congress, we expect, it's a current topic now with, unfortunately, there's some language in the agriculture appropriations minibus that is concerning to us, but assuming we get past that, and want to thank U.S. Senator Rand Paul for his leadership on that issue. Assuming we get past government funding issue that's plaguing everyone for other reasons right now, we anticipate Congress brings up the marijuana hemp regulatory issue probably in February or March.
There's been some really good journalism done on the local level. So, for example, Chris Parker from the Washington Missourian has done a number of pieces on the hemp space, even talking to local hemp growers. If you're a hemp grower out there and you've thought of putting a few acres into hemp production, you might have even done the research on fertility and soil testing and harvesting equipment, and you haven't yet pulled the trigger. In your opinion, Eapen, what's something that would cause a potential hemp grower to actually pull the trigger in the coming years and move forward with planting hemp?
So the plant gives you three things. It gives you seed, it gives you flower, which is where the cannabinoid-rich resins are extracted, whether it's CBD or THC or another cannabinoid molecule, and it gives you fiber, right? So the fiber and seed parts of the plant are where the future commodity status of this market lie, because fiber products can be used for everything from textiles to paper. You can actually make a kind of a graphene out of hemp fiber that is a very high value, product for the electronics market. There's like thousands of potential industrial applications for hemp fiber. Problem there is that America is just beginning to do the genetic optimization for fiber hemp that needs to happen in terms of like directing a specific genetic for a specific industrial use. The other problem there is processing and infrastructure, because America doesn't do a ton of its own processing of industrial processing anymore, and you need to like build the whole machine from scratch in terms of having the harvesting, having the processing equipment, and human labor and human capital to run those things, right? So we're at the very beginning of the emergence of that market space. The other possibility for the ordinary farmer is the nutrition market with the hemp seed, right? You go to a Schnucks or a Hy-Vee or whatever, you'll find hemp seed in the specialty foods aisle, but it's beginning to get a little bit more exposure in a lot of places. And the FDA just approved hemp seed for layer chickens as a feed additive, which is actually use that Missouri was. Missouri produced a lot of bird seed, from hemp seed 100 years ago. So it's a historic industry for Missouri. The animal nutrition market is going to be huge, because the hemp seed is a whole protein, has all your basic vitamins and minerals, and is just very nutritious, right? So it's a clean source of protein for all of your production animals. And again, for all the fiber and hemp potential uses, that farmer would have to find good genetics. You'd have to have harvesting, protocols and equipment to handle the crop. You'd have to have a destination, right? Once you get to the farm gate, someone's got to be able to come and pick it up and write you a check. Developing this commodity space is very challenging, but I've had a front row seat to this whole emergent industry space for the last 10 years, and it's incredibly exciting. So right now, for most farmers, you're beginning to see companies that will put a fulfillment contract on your acreage for hemp fiber or seed. So it's beginning to be viable. So, obviously the best way to do this is find a company that will give you that fulfillment contract and work with them to establish the rest of the process. And it's going to be something that 2 or 3 years to for the farmer to learn the crop anyway. So, start small, start with 5 acres, 10, 20 next year, 50, 100, year three. And then after that, you're probably in a position to like substantially expand, hopefully.
So, to sum up, what you're saying is that when it comes to the statewide ballot initiative, you could expect Missouri voters and folks in this space to know probably before Thanksgiving whether it's a go or no go. And if it happens to
Right,
be a no go, then you'll have more information about what a legislative remedy might be.
right.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That was Eapen Thampy, marijuana lobbyist extraordinaire. When we come back in both B Block and C Block, how to save money in 2026. You're listening to The Farm Show on Westplex Talk 1045.